Whose is this? This one's a Zerg versus Protoss. I'm not sure which player it is. Let's take a look. I was the Zerg. Okay, so it's Trace. So Trace here is saying, hey, what up, pig? I feel like I was very lucky to hold the first push in this game. What do I need to do to hold that better? Do I just make more of the units I had instead of drones? Okay, very specific question. Awesome. Let's take a look at this game. So right off the bat, we see a common issue, which is, guys, learn which maps are the small 2-player maps, and whenever you're on them, if you're going to go for a hatchery first, make sure you send that drone down ahead of time. And the moment you see a probe, assume you're going to get blocked. Now, he actually could have put that down, but he was very slow at doing that. So Trace just reacted a little bit slowly there. But what you should always do is assume he's going to block you and just take your gas and pool or go take your third base. One or the other. Him, he kind of panicked a little bit. Took too long to press the buttons. Drone wasn't centered. The drone should have been centered. And then he gets blocked, and this delays the hatchery. And not only this, but Trace makes a fundamental error, which so many Zergs make, which is trying to fight that probe. Now, if that probe chose to, he could have pylon blocked this, and at that point, Trace would have said, oh shit, I have 460 minerals, and I haven't started the spawning pool or a hatchery, and I'm not building drones. I'm already way behind, and almost nothing's happened in this game. So remember, assume the probe is going to block you. Immediately drop a spawning pool or go and take your third base. Just assume it's going to get blocked if there's a probe there. Otherwise, you're gambling with your livelihood as a Zerg player. So that's number one. Does finally drone up, get the gas and pool behind that. Most players get so tilted by that single pylon block. It's the number one way of Zerg tilt. And his opponent's gone Nexus first. Wow, greedy boy. Hey, Dan Brenner, thanks for hanging out, my friend. So macro, guys, is macro is your spending of money. You're building up a big economy. Micro is all about managing your individual units, taking engagements, and getting the most out of how you fight your opponent. So macro is economy, micro is fighting and engagements. Now this is actually so sick, guys. Wow, that's a great start there for Trace, taking down the Forge. Problem for Trace, though, once again, has been distracting himself. This is something we always talk about over and over and over again. This is one of the most common supply blocks, is 36 supply. You've always got to remember to build at least one Overlord on about 30 supply. And also, once again, no third base from the Zerg player. There, oh no, he does get the third. Okay, he does get the third, but yeah, he should have already had the Overlords down. Okay, good boy. But then he gets distracted, and he says, oh, let's micro. Remember, guys, the golden rule. Tell the Zerglings to move here, somewhere safe, and do a full round of macro before you commit to any micro. Otherwise, you are disrupting your own rhythm. Your rhythm should be finish a full macro cycle. So what does that involve, guys? Build drones, inject, build drones / fighting units, build overlords, and then focus on your micro. And that gives you a 20-30 second window where you're not being punished for looking at your micro, at your units. You're allowed to focus on your units because you've just cleared all of your macro tasks back home. Your economy is rolling. But what happens here is right at the point where he desperately needs an overlord and hasn't realized it, he distracts himself by focusing on the aggression. When if he simply waited a few seconds, did his macro, then came in and focused on the aggression, he would most likely do the exact same amount of damage, but he wouldn't be handicapping his economy at home. So guys, always try to get that macro, micro kind of mix of your focus with your abilities, and in general, prioritize the spending of the economy. The macro, the micro usually comes second to it. I'm not saying don't focus on your micro. I'm saying just clear up all your macro tasks first, then you can focus on the fancy unit control. Massive problem here is he did finally remember the overlords while he was microing that, but he's got almost 800 minerals. And these Zerglings, he's still microing them. And even though it's definitely disrupting his opponent, and maybe it's breaking even, like I said, if he was spending his money back at home, Trace would be so far ahead right now. But only now does he queue up 11 drones. So there's a little bit of macro going on in the midst of this, but if Trace had just done that little bit extra at the start, oh, he'd be so far ahead right now. So I like what Trace is doing. I say he or she. I always just, it's this bad habit. I'm like, literally only boys play my video game, even though every event I meet many girls that play as well. It's like, come on, man. I don't know. conditioning. I'm gonna call it conditioning. Stalkers and Zealots, there we go. 6 gateways, yeah. Okay, so it's gonna be, remember he was talking about the attack. So what's Trace missing right now, guys? Vision outside the base. You should always have a Zergling outside your opponent's base and at all their possible expansions. Also, he's going for Overlord speed, but this is a very late Overlord speed. Way too late in the game to really help you out. Where's the Roach Warren? Where's the Baneling Nest? And why you want a giant 4-base economy? A couple of safety tips for Trace here. As a general rule, to keep yourself safe, at about the 4-minute mark, maybe 4 minutes 30, we can say 44 to 50 supply at the latest. So about this stage, you want to be building a Roach Warren or a Baneling Nest, depending on what defensive tech you want. And you can apply that to all matchups to some extent, but especially Zerg vs Protoss, like no later than 50 supply, you should be building that defensive tech. And that's like the absolute latest you can push it. So make sure, guys, Roach Warren or Bane Nest, nice and early, because what have we got here? No map vision, except this one Overlord, which doesn't really see everything. So just a little bit of map vision, and then no actual, just a massive, massive economy. No defense, and not just no defense, but if we even saw the push move out, what could Trace possibly do? Just build a few Zerglings. Roaches, Ravages are what you use to stop attacks. They're your big defensive unit as a Zerg player. Roaches and Ravages shut down pretty much all aggression, especially against Protoss. But building Zerglings, if you've got 10 lava, you can build 20 Zerglings. And I'll tell you what, 20 Zerglings, not very good for stopping a push. But if you can build 10 Roaches and turn some of those even into Ravages, that's actually a really good force. And even now, more Queens, more Zerglings, more Overlords are on the way because didn't have that map vision, wasn't sure that the push was coming, and going straight to Hydras. So this is a 4-base rush to Hydras. This is just too greedy. A couple of small changes is the scouting, getting the defensive tech. But what about building defensive units, guys? I'm okay for you to not just build a billion Roaches, but let's think about economic comparisons. And this is a really great concept. So if you build 100 workers and your opponent only has 50 workers, are you ahead? In economy, yes, you are. But assuming you've gone to 100 workers and your opponent's gone to 50 and you both started at the same point, you've invested in pure economy for many minutes on end. Now, assuming you both have the same skill, the same spending abilities, the same kind of overall abilities, but your opponent's invested not in 100 workers but 50, where has the rest of his money gone for? It kind of has to be going into fighting units, right? Or tech. It's something that can kill you. If you think about it simply, it's like if they're not building extra bases and workers, they're building stuff that can kill us. So if I keep building workers and then more workers and then more workers, what do I have to defend? I have workers. And he has fighting units. I should die. This is why you always want to think of it in terms of, I want to have a worker lead on my opponent. I'd like to have a bit more economy, but there's always going to be a certain point where you just don't have enough defense and they can just walk across the map and kill you. Because they've said, for the last 3 minutes, I've done nothing but build Stalkers and Sentries. And you're like, for the last 3 minutes, I did nothing but build drones and I built 10 Zerglings. And that was it. Your opponent can then come over, punch you in the face, and you're like, ugh, I died. So how do you keep track of this? How do you compare your economy to your opponent? It's very simple. You don't know exactly what's going on, but you have to be very rough in kind of estimating. Now, what's the simple way? What was I talking about before, guys? A Zergling at each potential expansion would have told us that our opponent only had 2 bases in this game, and we knew this for many, many minutes. So if our opponent has 2 bases, let's assume they took these gases, which Hayek didn't. That means they would have about 45, at most 50 workers. So if we want to have more economy but still be safe, we could go maybe 10 workers more than that. We could go up to 55 workers. We could go up to maybe, at the absolute most, 60. But we'd need to be putting everything else into fighting units. If we're doing that, we can't be making a ton of upgrades and a ton of bases at the same time because we're already pushing the worker count. Now, in this case, you might say, but look, Trace went to 55 workers. Well, yeah, but didn't have defensive tech. Trace actually stopped at the right worker count to stop this push, just didn't have the right fighting units. And was building things like Queens and Hydra tech, all these things which are way too far down the line. So a simple solution here is to say, if my opponent's on 2 base, I'm going to get just a good handful of drones on my 3rd, and I'm going to stop droning, and I'm just going to build a ton of Roaches and Ravages, and I will stomp whatever comes my way. Now, because Trace didn't do that, but only built pure Zerglings, which aren't the greatest unit for fighting, especially when they don't have upgrades. The force fields absolutely destroy, and these zealots come in, which are great as well. And I mean, Trace has just been so greedy. Trace has so much money. Could have 12 more Ravagers. Zerglings aren't lava efficient, right? You need so many hatcheries to get enough Zerglings out. So remember, Roaches are a much more, oh shit, he's going to attack me, he's moving out. Build a whole bunch of Roaches and Ravagers, you crush this push, and you just get so far ahead because your opponent's on 2 bases with no transition. There's no other tech at home. It's literally just a ton of gateways and a Warp Prism. There's nothing going for Hayek in the follow-up. And that would have been a game right there. So GG, well played. Good question there from Trace. How do I stop that push? Do I just need more of the same units? No, absolutely not. You need Roaches, mate. Banelings would be okay if you had like built some Spines and some Queens, but Roaches are your one-size-fits-all, let's shut down 2 base. If you want to go Zerglings, get the melee upgrade. If you see a big push coming, build some Spines and have some extra Queens around, but generally Roaches just make your life easier. Oh, my opponent's not going for a 3rd. Let's have a Roach Warren. Even if you don't plan to use it, and you go, oh, wait, he's coming with a big push. Emergency branch of my build order is build a bunch of Roaches and shit on my opponent. To put it most eloquently. That's what we call it. Just take a bit of a shit on him. Next up, we're going to look at Omnidren's replay. So let's take a look through this one, guys. I'm going to try and... I got to speed